Welcome to Mental Health, It's a Trap. We're your hosts, Susan and Stephen, mother and son, unravel the complexities of the mental health traps people fall in. Join us on this podcast journey as we demystify the mental health labyrinth, explore common issues, and provide you with tools to navigate this sometimes extremely daunting terrain. You can expect engaging conversations, personal stories, and probably also have a laugh or two. Access to mental health care should not be what causes you additional stress. We invite you to follow along and we can embrace the darkness together.
Welcome back, everybody. Well, not just today. September is Suicide Prevention Month, and I know that we talked about how people have thoughts about not wanting to be here. Some people have attempts, some people have plans. So we wanted to have an open and informal discussion, as normal, of just kind of throwing out ideas and our perspectives on how sometimes we get stuck in stories, sometimes we become our stories. And I know oftentimes when people are further out and they're getting through their healing journey, or they're in a sort of transformational part of their life where they don't let their story define them, and they can have what some people call post-traumatic growth or growth in general. And so today we're gonna just kind of go back and forth about some examples of how people get stuck in that mindset, and some people call it a victimhood mindset, and just kind of see where things go. And we were kind of talking about a garden group that my mom had done while at a community mental health center. And again, as we talked about before, just how when we do different things, sometimes those can cause the healing aspects when we don't confine ourselves to, oh, I don't garden, like, oh, I don't have a green thumb, I kill everything that I grow, which could be true, but if you don't know how to garden, you're not gonna be able to know how to.
Right, well, that definitely was me, because when I had a client ask me to do a garden group, I said, I kill cactuses, but okay, if that's something you want to try, let's figure out, how we make that happen. And we had to, go through the channels to get approval. And after that was done, the garden group started. And a lot of the clients that I worked with were in stuck places of my life is going nowhere. I'm not healthy, physically, medically, and mental health wise, right? So just a lot of factors not functioning well in their life, inability to work, inability to care for self, a lot of different parts for them. And, had done groups over the years, DBT groups, anger management groups, and those types of groups. And it was always more just sitting in a group, sitting in a room, just staying stuck, right? And in doing the garden group, I watched them evolve over time. And it didn't mean that they became these great people. They were great people, so I don't want to say that, they got to a place where things were, really great in their lives. It was just more about the steps to get to a better space and get out of the stuck place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of, what I witnessed over time, and watched them grow in advocacy, socializing with others, decision making, because that was a really big thing. When you're in a stuck place, it's hard to make decisions. I'm not going to make the right decision. I'm going to, I might hurt others if I do this, or I might
go down this path, and it might, I think it's like scary kind of things when it comes to making decisions. And so, I had the opportunity to really watch them grow over the years. We had done the group for years, and and I grew with them. I learned a lot about gardening and about different plants and trees and grass and digging holes and and being able to step back and let them run the group, right? So that's really what a group is. I'm there only to just kind of mediate and make sure everyone plays nice in the sandbox, which can be really challenging when people are trying to find their voice, when they're struggling with some, severe persistent mental illness and poor functioning. And just to, I had the opportunity to have them write their experience of what the garden group was like for them, and being able to read those letters of what they wrote was just a testament of where they started and where they ended, after we discontinued running garden group.
Did you have did you have anything before, like written like, I guess, like a pre-group where they were at, or was it just more of a post-group?
It was more a post group. It would have been really cool to do a pre group. Now that you asked that question, that would have been cool. So, if I do groups again, which I love doing groups, I just like to do groups that are very different and outside the box, right? Because I think in mental health, we focus on the pathology, right? What do you struggle with? So let's do, I think groups have changed. There's yoga groups, there's meditation groups, and those groups can be helpful, though I think we need to offer more. I think we really need to be able to step out of that box, because particularly with the population served in community mental health centers, they're really struggling. They're our most struggling population, right? And they've been in the system a long time. They've been dealing with their mental health issues for a long time. So guess what? They're doing the same things over and over and hoping for a different result, right? And that's not happening. And then, they're going, they struggle with suicidality. It's very prominent in that population. And so sometimes what we're doing isn't working. So how do we help them step out of that stuck place? Because the further they get stuck, the more we see attempts, we see statements of, I don't want to be here, I'm worthless, I don't have support in my life. They just go down this path and they get stuck in this dark hole. And showing them that there's light and like how movement can be helpful, and really looking at that stuck place is within. It's the internal part of each of us, right? When we're in that space. I've struggled with suicidality myself, and losing Stacy and just being stuck in life sometimes. And thankfully, never had to go through the plan and intent. Maybe some plan, no intent. And just having the ability to move in a different direction without getting stuck there. And, being able to help people, extend that hand with no judgment of like, I get it, I know you're stuck. And there's more than what you're living within yourself. And I think that's the place where change has to happen. Mm-hmm. And what has your experience been, doing the crisis line and, you've mentioned having the same people calling in over and over again. So something's not working, something's not changing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think even in, all the discussions that we've kind of had so far is that, well, routine is good, right? Routine is good and helpful in that aspect, but that's also a story as well, right? Like, I get up early, I do my dishes, I clean, I do my chores, and then other people are like, I get up, I don't make my bed, I rush out the door, right? So when we think about even those being part of the story is the routines that we have or the habits that we get stuck in, and working on the crisis line more specifically in King County in Washington State, it's different in the sense that the people who answer the phone, the volunteers, are, everyday people. Sometimes they can be clinicians and people who are going for their masters in mental health or social work or psychology. However, a vast majority of them are just everyday people who have struggled with their own crisis or thoughts of not wanting to be here, and they wanted to give back. And so when we get callers who, call frequently, whether it's, once a week or once a day, or some people who call multiple times a day, I think it serves the purpose of being there for people, because obviously if it wasn't working, people would not be calling back, right? And it also reinforces that behavior of, well, they have to answer the phone when they call, so they can't necessarily just hang up. Now, there are different, protocols in place where if people do call multiple times a day, we want to make sure that we're not spending a lot of time talking with them. Now, it's hard to say again if they are not in crisis, because if we let them define it, then if they're like, oh, I'm in crisis, like sometimes, yes, they're not, and they just need that support and someone to talk to when, again, they don't have people in their lives, or they have people, but they're not supportive. And so why would you talk with your family and friends if they're not really supportive, or if they're going to ignore you when you have a crisis line you could call who is going to be there, answer the phone, and provide that support. So I think people can get stuck in that sense because it's not therapy. And so although the volunteers get a lot of training and they have clinicians supervising the room, they're not therapists, so they're not there to do therapy. They're just kind of doing more of active listening, being empathetic, and then trying to, again, get the person on the phone to come to not necessarily a safety plan, although depending sometimes it does get to that point where they might do a safety plan of let's see how you do for the next 15 to 30 minutes. And if it doesn't work, then call us back. Or going through who do you have who you could call, or is there someone in the home with you, right? Just to make sure they're safe or they have someone for support. And so I think it's a very gray area because, again, people have support, but they don't, right? So if they don't believe or feel that they have support, even though they do, because I've seen that too. There are people who do have a lot of support and they're still stuck in that downward spiral, or stuck in the mud, whatever you want to call it, where it's kind of what you mentioned earlier is if people are able to do new and different things, it helps to show them that they can be more than what they are in that moment, or what they feel like they can't be anything other than depressed or anxious and things like that.
Right. So it talks about behavior patterns or habits, right? You mentioned habits, and I think part of that is the behavior patterns. So, if I am in a stuck place and I don't want to get out of bed and I don't want to shower and I barely eat, and so obviously a depressed state. And, the longer that I do that, the more comfortable that space becomes, right? The unhealthy, comfortable space. And so then it starts to, impact the thoughts, right? Of I'm worthless. I can't, I'm not successful. I can't do anything. I have no friends, because now you start to isolate and shut people out. And again, it's that activating behavior change, right? And we had one of the speakers on here. We had a speaker about a month or two ago that talked about activating behaviors and stuff. And there's a lot of truth to that, because if I say I build a routine of, I'm just going to get up and shower in the morning and have a piece of toast, right? It's a small little thing. And to be able to build upon that, to really start to change the core of the person, right? Like starting to change and I don't know what the word is that I want to use, but kind of like, put a little spark internally to just start to ignite different parts of the body and brain that start to create behavior changes and start to create, waves in the brain of saying like, oh, I actually felt better today. I got up. It's even during COVID, so many people stopped their routines, and we saw increased depression and anxiety and suicidality.
Well, actually, do you want to know that it actually dipped during COVID?
It dipped?
Yeah. So when you talk about, again, when we hear the stories and the narratives, and we're like, and you're saying like, oh, like there's an increase, like there might have been an increase, and even if we just say thoughts, in terms of the statistics of what, of what they recorded, right? So they can't get everything. They can't talk with every person to get like something that gives you a bigger picture. However, in terms of during the pandemic, it actually went down in terms of like SI and things like that.
And it right. And again,
but right.
It depends on the gathering of the information and all of that, right? And statistics is, to me, it's a guide. It kind of gives us information, right? And I can say from my experience while working in the field, and I remember working with a client specifically, a male client, who said to me, now the rest of the world is going to know how I live my life every day, being socially isolated and all of that. This is going to be great for me. And 6 months in, he changed his tune. He's like, wow, this is really impacting me, right? And so, and I can say just in general, we saw an increase in first episode of psychosis in a lot of young males between the ages of 18 and 26 who were now home, not working, playing video games, a lot of smoking marijuana, and not socializing. And so I think there's pockets, and definitely there were some increases and some dips that occurred during that. And then the transition of getting back into routine again, we may have seen another dip for some people, and maybe an increase for others who were excited. And then they got comfortable being at home, So I think there's a lot of factors that play into that. I know for me, I needed to maintain my routine, even though I had to work from home. In general, I mean, I worked in community mental health. We were out in the field. We were in homes. We still had to provide services to our clients. And so, though the therapy sessions in general were from home, either on phone or video, and that was really hard. It was a hard transition for me. I did not like it. And so I tried to be in the office as much as I could, or be in the homes. And, I could see the struggles that people were having of getting into these stuck places, of being even more socially isolated. So, I don't know. So I think that routine, so I said, I'm going to keep my routine. I'm going to get up every day and still shower in the morning, even though I'm not going to work. But again, I was meeting clients on video, so I had to be presentable. It's like those kinds of things. And I think by keeping that routine, it really helped me personally. And in talking with other people during that time, losing their routine, they became more depressed because they were just not even, I mean, they would get up, but they wouldn't shower, they wouldn't brush their teeth, and they felt yucky. And so I think it's, and again, I think everyone has their story of what their journey has been for them, not just with COVID, just with life in general. And I do believe that we tend to gravitate towards what we know. Right? So if I struggle with substance use, I'm going to gravitate towards other substance use, towards other people who are struggling with substance use, because I know that culture. That's the culture I live in. That's what I know. If I step out of that, right, then I might be thinking, oh, these people are going to judge me, if I use. So again, and I think that's true for a lot of other things in life. Our stories, like, we tend to gravitate towards, if people are happy and I'm depressed, I want to be with happy people. I want to be with people who are more down. So again, that stuck place and feeling like that's all there is to life, by being able to step outside of that and say, no, there are other things to life. There is this other big world out there, which can be scary.
Yeah, I think the difference for some people is, like, I have a story versus I am my story. And so even if people think about it in that aspect, hopefully there can be change, because saying I am depressed, I am anxious, I am an addict. Are you? Right? If you question and reflect, like, is this who I am? Or are these, like, if we kind of talk about parts, like, is this a part of me right now? Because then if it's a part of you right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a part of you in the future, right? So again, it could be a part of your story. And even if that means that's the present right now, and if that's the future for the next year, like, again, when we think about being able to grow from, like, I guess, who we think we are or who we think we have to be, because I think that kind of is in there of, like, are we being someone because of other people's expectations that we feel we can't meet? Or are we, like, a perfectionist because we want to look good to other people, that, like, we have our stuff together? And breaking it apart of understanding that we're more than who we are or who we think we should be.
Right. No, I agree. It's, I think I've sat with many people over the years, and I remember when I first came into the field, I had one client say to me, I'm bipolar. And I said, I'm Susan. What's your name? Right? Again, because we define ourselves sometimes by those labels. I'm an addict. There's a lot of controversy about politically correct language. And I think that it can mask by being compassionate, kind, and empathetic, right? So there's a big difference. And I just had a conversation with a family member recently, and that person said to me, well, that's just PC. And I said, no, we were talking about, documenting in people's records, in ethical, and that each client has a right to look at their records. So we don't get to write in there what our thoughts or feelings are about the person. It's about really, how did the client do in the session? What did you work on? And I've seen some pretty horrific things written in client charts that are very condescending, derogatory, judgmental. And I use the example of, say, a child goes to school, right? And the child has some significant trauma going on in the home. The school doesn't know about the trauma. So they label this child with ODD, oppositional defiance disorder, and whatever other labels that they can come up with. And unfortunately, that child now has to go through the school system, and everyone's talking about that child. So that child never has a chance for people to see who the child is. They're seeing the results of the behavior from the trauma, right? So if the school knew this child was experiencing trauma at home, it gives us a different lens to work through. And how do we support the child? How do we support the family? What needs to happen, and all of that. So again, we don't always know each person's story of what they're living, and then and they're trying to be two different people, being a person in the home and being a person in the school setting. So, again, it's kind of that, thinking about not being politically correct with our language, though being more compassionate and understanding, right? And so if we continue to define ourselves like I am my story versus this is my story, it's not about being politically correct. It's about being who you are and having these experiences in your life that have made some, dings and impacts and good things and bad things, right? And so how do you manage all of that, I think, is more where my brain would go in that area.
Yeah, and also, again, as we've said before, doing different things. Because, for example, going to see a therapist, it might not work. And then you may, oh, no, therapy doesn't work for me. Like, I have all these problems, no one can help me. I tried. The flip side is people can also do the work and go to multiple therapists and still have a negative experience and then feel like, what's the point? I've tried multiple times. I did all the different things. Nothing is working. So I think that's another thing too, is like people get hopeless and helpless because either they tried and they had a negative experience, or the flip side, they tried a lot and they tried different things and nothing's working. So I don't think it's having a balance, because sometimes there isn't. Like if you're trying, then you're putting in the effort. Mm-hmm. And doing the work in the beginning is often harder because you have to feel the feelings and you have to work through, or again, change who you are, because you can't change other people. So if we're having issues in our relationships, or if other people have different behaviors that cause things in us to get frustrated or angry, like we can't change them. But then again, it still changes the story if you're doing the work to heal and grow and transform from where you are to not be your story. And then tying in, if we, kind of throw in some more grayness of when you're talking with other people in relationships, you can't change them. However, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to like cut them out of your life or like talk down to them, because you have the skills of being able to communicate better, right? And be more empathetic. And I mean, it makes me think of one of the people that, that come to my group, and they're basically estranged from their family because of religious reasons. But the person who is kind of, somewhat kicked out of the family is the one who went to therapy and did the work. And they're stuck in this, like, I want a better relationship with my family because I love them, but they're not willing to do the work. And so they're kind of like, the family is like pushing them away, even though they're like, I want to try. And so it's an interesting dynamic, and it gets obviously more difficult when there are more people involved.
Right, exactly. And I hear that a lot, more than I'd like to hear. And it comes down to, it's the struggle, right? I love my family and they don't want to have a relationship with me. And so it's that insanity piece. Like, I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to try different things. And it comes down to the realization of, can I still have a relationship with boundaries, or do I have to have no relationship at all? And sometimes it comes down to that. And it's really, really hard to have to say, I can't have a relationship with this family member anymore. Or I can have a relationship, though this is what I need from this relationship in order to have it. So it's, again, setting the boundary. And it's not easy. I think it's one of the hardest things that I've seen people have to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think we all have that within our family systems for the most part. Of just conflict and misunderstanding and, hurt and, anger and all kinds of things. And again, it comes down to the question, what do I have control over?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's, again, like you said, it's like a difficult spot to be in, because whether you call it like biological, right, of the intersections of like love and relationships in general, but like, right, so like if you're like the kid, and or even if you're an adult child, like, and you're not getting that love from your parents, it's like, how do you disconnect? Or I don't think it would be called unloving them, but it might feel that way, because if you have to like draw the line in the sand, or like, cut the cord, or whatever you want to call it, but you're not getting like the love and support from a family system that is supposed to love and support you.
Well, I've said to people over the years, sometimes the people we need the most from do not have the ability to give us what we need. And so recognizing that can be helpful in some ways and then hurtful in other ways, right? So because everyone has their story, right, wrong, or indifferent, no judgment, right? Everyone has stories. They have their journeys, and we don't always know what each person's journey has been. And so it's easy to say, my dad didn't, wasn't good doing this, my mom this, or my grandparent, my sibling, whatever it is. They may not have the ability to meet the need that we have. And so, and it's expectations, right? So we expect that our family will love us and care for us unconditionally. And that's not always the case. And so that can create for people at times a sense of worthlessness, hopelessness, feeling unloved, feeling abandoned. And then those feelings then create these stuck places, and then unhealthy relationships as we age, and all kinds of things. Though when we can do that work around that piece of, they just couldn't give me what I needed, and they still do not have the ability to give me what I needed, and I can get that in healthy ways from other people, then sometimes that helps define what relationship you want to have with them or not have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, sure, Devi talked about that, right? Like acceptance and commitment. If not acceptance, like at least some form of acknowledgement, because I think if it happens in the background, or if we shove it under the rug, it's still there. And if we kind of ignore that it's there, or just ignore the story, then it, sometimes it's more of a feeling that we have. And then we're like, I don't know what this feeling is, but it's like, it's all this bad stuff that happened and you pushed it down and forgot about it, but the feeling is still there. So finding a way to acknowledge like why you feel the way you feel or what you're feeling, because sometimes you just don't know what we're feeling. And I mean, I think a little bit maybe too is even like with you and your anger and grief of like not knowing what it was, but then going to therapy and then sitting with it and being like, oh, that's what this is. Connecting the dots.
Exactly. It's sometimes, again, it's not about starting over from birth on. It's more about the impacts. Like, what have the impacts been in your life that have played a role in who you are? Not defined who you are, played a role. I think it's a very different, call it PC, call it whatever you want, people. I just call it reframing language.
Yeah.
And so I think it's about knowing those things and healing the parts of you from those experiences to get out of the stuck places and to be able to find that there's more than just those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen a lot of people be stuck.
Yeah.
And it's, and then you kind of get dragged into the stuck a little bit yourself as a therapist, and you go, now what do I do? Or, and so it's giving it back to the client and saying, okay, so where do we want to go from here? I'm feeling stuck with you. If we're both feeling stuck, something's not working, right? And being able to problem solve and try to find other ways to move out of that stuck space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big thing. I mean, I know there's experiments that were done like in terms of like learned helplessness, and so people can get, when you're stuck in patterns, I think that's what happens is like you feel helpless, and then you in some sense become helpless because you're like, I don't have control over this, so this is who I am, versus, again, acknowledging, okay, I can't control this, but like you said, like what can I control? I can't control this person, or I can't control this situation, or I can't control the pandemic. So what can I do, and how can I focus on what I can do so that I don't get stuck in the story, or I don't become my story. I can grow from it.
Right, exactly. And I had a thought and it just jumped out of my head. Love when those things happen. I think it was when you were talking about the story. I don't know. I can't think of it now. So I'm just going to let it slide and it'll come back when it needs to. Now it's going to drive me nutty.
Yeah, you'll remember it after.
I'll text you at 2:00 in the morning and say, "Oh, I remembered." It had something to do with the story and defining, and so this is what I do. When I get forgetful, I backtrack, and then usually I can figure it out. But I don't want to use that much brain power.
Right. Well, one of the resources that I want to share with people, if you want to go check it out, it is called The Danger of a Single Story. It is a TED Talk by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I'm not going to spell it out. So go into YouTube and type in The Danger of a Single Story. It kind of talks about what we were talking about and how we can get stuck in defining ourselves or other people based on our experiences that we lived, or the story that we're told, or again, the story that we tell ourselves. So if you have any thoughts, if you have any questions, if you would like to hear more on this conversation, getting stuck, and sometimes, again, without people wanting to be alive, let us know. And I will give the last word to my mom because she remembered.
I did remember. So the one thing that I want to share that I think is really important is that more than one thing can exist in the same space, right? I love my family and they can't meet my expectations or they can't meet my needs, right? Is very different than saying they can't meet my needs but I still love my family. We use that but word and the and word, right? So the and allows two things to exist in the same space. So I think it's important to know that we can still love our family and also know that we might not be able to have a relationship with them or with anyone. It's not just family, it could be friends, people at school, co-workers, it could be anyone. And I think we get stuck in the space of this is just it. This is only, they don't love me. I can't have a relationship. You know what I mean? And it gets in that stuck space. Whereas, I do love my family. I will always care about them. And I just can't have a relationship with them. Or I need to have this type of relationship in order for me to be okay.
Yeah.
So that's all I wanted to share.
I think when we remove permanence, we allow for the possibility of change. So, I love my family and my relationship is different, but that might just be right now. Or I love my family and I don't have a relationship with them right now, right? It doesn't have to be a forever thing because some people do come around. It might take them 10 years, which is probably crappy for the person who's waiting or not waiting. Right. Again, if you're waiting, then again, it's like, how do you change your relationship with waiting, right? Because I feel like if you're waiting and waiting and waiting, then you're still giving them control because you're waiting versus I'm going to live my life. I love you. If you decide to come back, then, that relationship's going to be different. And I'm not going to let that keep me down or keep me stuck.
Right. I agree.
All right, beautiful people. Again, any questions or comments, or if you want to hear more, let us know and take care.